Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. It's Thursday. Thursday means open forum, but I am especially delighted today for open forum because I get to work with two of the finest apologists and really coolest men I have gotten to work with. That's Tim Staples' first hour. Second hour, Jimmy Akin. That's a pretty good day when you do an hour with Tim Staples and then an hour with Jimmy Akin. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. If you have a question about anything that we Catholics do or believe, if you have any questions about why or how we justify the way we live and the way we believe, all those questions are welcome. Catholics are welcome to call. Non-Catholics are welcome to call. 888-318-7884. Tim Staples is our Director of Apologetics and Evangelization here at Catholic Answers. Tim, how are you?
I am doing well.
You had to find out your mic was on there.
The longer I went, there it is. Okay. Great to be here, man.
Very good to have you here.
Fresh from the dentist office, by the way.
And what'd they say? Yeah, you're going to get to keep the teeth? Or?
I am.
Okay, good. I'm so glad. We were all worried about whether they'd have to all come out. With your other thing that you got going on, I know that sometimes like the dentist says, or there's maybe something connected between your heart and your teeth. So the dentist will be like, if you can't have dental work if you have certain heart problems, and you can't.
That is true. Actually, with the problems that I have, there are in fact, my dentist told me that today because he's well aware of it, that there are certain things we'll hold off on for a little bit.
Oh, for a little bit.
Yeah.
You know what? I guess I had never mentioned to you that we were starting a brand new game show tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because you look completely flummoxed.
But I think it's very cool, and I look forward to participating.
I'm so fired up about it now because we did a run-through today.
With Carlo.
With Carlo. And Carlo, I don't know if people, it always comes across to people just how great Carlo is. I mean, he's just a great person and he's fun. Oh, he just walked in. Never mind. I am so tired of Carlo Broussard. There's any way we can get rid of that guy? 888, at least he's smiling. 318-7884, the number. 888-31-TRUTH. Tim, I also forgot to mention, or I neglected to mention, Tim is the author of Behold Your Mother, a biblical and historical defense of the Marian doctrines.
Amen, brother.
I got that in the wrong order.
Took me a long time to train you to say that right.
Yeah, I am slow on the uptake on that stuff. You wouldn't believe how long it took me to get Mark Brumley's The 7 Deadly Sins of Apologetics correct. I said the name of that book wrong so many times. He was very patient and then threatened to sue me, and then I learned it after the lawsuit.
And I broke every one of those 7 things you're not supposed to do over and over and over.
Well, yeah, but you do, though, and that's part of being human for one thing, and you got to just gain experience over time.
Yep. Fail. What do they say in marketing? Fail your way to success. Right?
Yes, right. Oh, success must be right around the corner for me then, because I've been failing like crazy. We already got callers.
Yes.
You feel comfortable just going to the phones?
Let's rock and roll.
All right. Once again, Tim Staples is our guest, and it is open forum. If you got any question about the Catholic faith, you're welcome to call. First up is Steve from Indiana. Steve is watching on YouTube. Thanks for watching us on YouTube, Steve. Your question for Tim Staples.
Hi, Tim.
Yes.
I was talking to a person about some pro-life stuff, and I was explaining how even in the womb, it doesn't matter if a baby hasn't achieved a certain level of cognitive ability, the parents still have duties to the kid. And a person asked me, well, what if you have a case, and this is something that can really happen, where the baby is basically born without much of a brain to speak of, basically a fully functioning brain stem that can support the rudiments of life, but there is not much anything at all going on there inside the person. That was my.
Is that your wife?
Falling over.
Oh.
That was my kid falling over.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Anyways, so the person asked, are parents required to try to raise this essentially brain stem to adulthood? Is that something that they're required to do? If
Right.
it's true that they have to have duties to the child in the womb. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's a great question, Steve. And you probably know, Steve, that a child that doesn't have a brain, only has a brain stem, is normally not going to live very long. However, we are required to ensure that that child is not killed. And that's where the church, and I think sacred scripture is clear on this, draws the line, is that God is the author of life, and therefore it's in the words of Job, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. So even though folks might say, well, this child's functioning is so diminished, is this even human because the child doesn't have a brain? Well, absolutely, it's human. This is a child. It's male or female, has a mommy and a daddy, DNA and such. So he or she is created in the image and likeness of God, and so we have to respect that. Now, of course, we don't have to go to extraordinary means to keep someone like this alive. If they die of the natural course of having that, just a brain stem, we're not required to go to extraordinary means to keep them alive, but we respect the fact that God is the author of all human life, and we can't take it. We cannot do anything to directly intend or actually carry out the death of that child.
Okay, Steve?
All right, thank you so much.
All right,
Thank
buddy.
you very much. Sounds like your child calmed down. I think somebody got taken care of there in the background.
There you go. Those were soothing words to a child.
Yeah, yeah, that's funny, Tim. Oh, I feel better. Okay,
That's right.
let's see if we get another
You mean
call.
no matter what I do?
No matter what I do, Dad. Okay. Victoria in Owensville, Kentucky, watching on Facebook Live. Oh, cool. We got people from YouTube and Facebook starting off the show today. Victoria, thanks for watching on Facebook. Your question for Tim.
Hello, gentlemen. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Yes.
Good. My question real quick is I'm dialoguing with a Messianic Jew, and he has presented me today with a video, a minister from the Moody Bible Institute, and he is basically talking about how the early church fathers were anti-Semitic, and this gentleman is using that as a stumbling block for not becoming Catholic. And I want to help him to be Catholic, and I was hoping you guys that Tim could help me out. I really need prayers and help with that.
Okay, Victoria.
As far as, so what is your question specifically? How do we answer the charge of anti-Semitism?
That, and I had a second question. I'll just drop it. Maybe you can't answer it.
Yeah.
He says that the gospel presented to the Jews is different from the Pauline gospel that was presented to the Gentiles.
Right. Okay, great. Two very good questions. Number one, the charges of anti-Semitism are so often taken so far out of context when you actually look into what is being said. So, what we have to do, I was just recently, in fact, looking into some specific cases from the Council of Florence and from St. John Chrysostom. And we have to recognize now, no doubt, St. John Chrysostom's work, it's called Against the Jews, has some stuff in it that is pretty, I would argue, is somewhat anti-Semitic. And even though we have to understand context, it's still, there's no excuse for some of the statements. And even though he's a father of the church and a saint, it doesn't mean he was perfect. However, you've also got quotes like from the Council of Florence that are taken out of context. There's not an iota of anti-Semitism in the Council of Florence. So what you have to do is kind of filter through and understand that, yeah, there are some things said by Christians in the past are anti-Semitic. And, we, in fact, famously, Pope St. John Paul the Great apologized for the wrongs that have been committed by Catholics over the centuries, and I have no problem with the Pope doing that. I know some folks were very upset at him for doing it, but I thought it was beautiful. Yes, we've done some bad things in the past, and we also have to understand that Jews have done bad things toward Christians as well, beginning in the first century. We can't overlook the historical facts rooted in the Gospels, that it was the Jews in an unholy alliance with the Romans that worked. In fact, that's why in Revelation 17, the whore of Babylon, sorry to my fundamentalist friends, it's not the Roman Catholic Church. It's actually Israel. And you have depicted there an unholy alliance, a marriage, if you will, unholy nuptial relationship between Rome and Jerusalem that brought about the crucifixion of our Lord and the persecution of Christians in the first century. Hence, that's why you have that strong language, and you have the strong language that recently, oh my gosh, what's his name, Farrakhan, the truly anti-Semite, taking out of context, Revelation chapter 2, where, yes, Jesus says that those who are say they're Jews and are not, they're of the synagogue of Satan and all of that. Farrakhan took those out of context. But those have to be understood in that first century context of what was going on here. But we have to understand as well. I mean, if you've ever read the martyrdom of St. Polycarp, for example, right, when he was about to be burned to death, you had the Jews running up with, use our wood. We've got some wood to burn him, there was genuine hatred both ways, and that went down through the centuries as well. But see, hatred is always wrong. To hate someone because they are a Jew or to hate someone because they're a Christian is absolutely wrong. The church has made that very clear, as did our Lord. We are called to love our enemies, Jesus says, right, in Matthew chapter 5, verse 44. And I think that's what you got to emphasize, number one. But for your second question, and so anyway, anti-Semitism is a no-go. Let's just make that really, really clear here. In fact, Jesus says in Matthew 5:22, if you have hatred in your heart for anyone, you are in danger of hellfire. That's a mortal sin. You're a murderer, Jesus says. Okay, so there's no room for that as Christians and as Catholics. But secondly, you say this idea of the two different gospels. That's a
can we
yes.
take that after the break? Because
okay.
I went
yes.
long. So Victoria, hang on. The second part of your question had to do if there's a gospel that was preached to the Jews and a different one that was preached to the Gentiles. We'll get an answer from Tim on that after we come back right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Hello, this is Archbishop Alexander Sample of the Archdiocese of Portland in Oregon. Keep that dial right here on Catholic Answers Live.
Hello, my friends. Summer is here. That means summer reading. I have great news. Catholic Answers is having its first ever summer book sale in the online shop at Catholic.com. For a limited time, you can get dozens of great books offered at $10, $5, even as low as $1 a copy. Now is the time to load up on solid Catholic books for yourself, your friends, and your family. Save 50% or more on books by Jimmy Akin, Tim Staples, Rod Bennett, Gary Machuda, and a whole host of great authors. And my personal favorite, all the books in our Catholic Answers Classic series are marked down as well. Log on now and all this month to the store at shop.catholic.com and take advantage of our first ever summer sale. Log on today at shop.catholic.com.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Howdy folks, this is Jimmy Akin, and I want to tell you about a special limited time offer we've got going right now on subscriptions to our award-winning Catholic Answers magazine. You can sign up today during our annual subscription drive, and not only can you save big bucks off the normal price, we'll also give you a digital subscription to the magazine for free. Subscribe today by calling 818 487-2011 or go to CatholicAnswersMagazine.com. Sign up for a 1-year subscription and we'll give you $10 off the normal price. Better yet, become a 2-year subscriber and we'll drop the price by $20. That's a savings of $10 to $20 plus a free digital subscription when you sign up for Catholic Answers Magazine. Act now because this is a limited time offer. Subscribe to Catholic Answers Magazine before our annual subscription drive ends. Phone 818-487-2011 or go to CatholicAnswersMagazine.com today.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, joined in studio today by our Director of Apologetics and Evangelization, Tim Staples. And when we went to the break, we were talking with Victoria. And you want to sum up where we are?
Yeah, great questions. We were just starting in on your second question, and that is, are there two different gospels, a gospel to the Jews and then a gospel to the Gentiles, sort of inaugurated by St. Paul? The answer is absolutely not. It's a very important question. It really is, because whenever you have that sort of, Cy, and to our caller, when you start dividing, like, oh, there's this gospel for these and this gospel for these, nothing good comes of that. There are all sorts of problems that develop, but the bottom line is, without getting into all the problems that come from it, Jesus made it very clear that, yes, he came first to the Jews. He came unto his own, John chapter 1 says, right? And his own received him not. St. Paul would even say later in Romans that, what is it, in Romans 1:15 and 16, as much as it is in me, I'm prepared to preach the gospel to those who are at Rome, for I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ, for it is the power of God to all those who believe, the Jew first and also the Greek. So, there's no doubt Jesus came first in the context of being the Jewish Messiah. He came first unto them. But he prophesied all over the place that he would go to the Gentiles. In fact, the Old Testament prophesied that the Messiah would go to the Gentiles. In fact, the Old Covenant really should have been taken to the world to begin with. The Jews were supposed to be a light to the nations, but they kind of turned in on themselves too much. That's one of the things Jesus came to rectify, is that the gospel he presents is for all the nations. And, the verse that immediately comes to mind is Matthew 28:18 through 20, where Jesus says, all authority in heaven and earth is given me. Go therefore and teach all nations, right? That's the ethnoi. That includes the goyim, right? The Gentiles. Teach all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. So there is no room here for, don't tell them everything. Just, tell them this part because this part is for you. No, it's the same gospel that's for everyone. And it's interesting, too, leaving St. Paul out of the equation here in the first part of the book of Acts. It was a huge problem because there was so much prejudice built up, Jews against Gentiles, right, that even Peter and the apostles didn't want to preach. Isn't that amazing, Si? They did not want to preach the gospel to the Gentiles. They wanted to stay with them. We're not going out there and preach to those icky people, right? They're unclean. I mean, that mentality was so beat into them that they really didn't. And in fact, Jesus had to appear 3 times or give a vision 3 times. Check it out in Acts chapter 10 to Peter, where he has that famous vision of a large sheet that comes down and unveils, opens up, and all manner of 4-legged creatures, unclean, quote-unquote, animals are there. And Jesus says the famous words, right? Kill and eat. That's right, to my Seventh-day Adventist friends and my Jewish friends. Kill and eat. That means in doing that, he declares all things clean, right? In fact, he had done that even in the Gospels back in Matthew chapter 15 when he said, it's not that which goes into the mouth that defiles a man, but that which comes out of the mouth, ek cardion, out of the heart. Okay, so very important here. He gives them this vision. And by the way, he had to do, this is amazing. He had to do it 3 times. Why? Because Peter said, nope. I mean, talk about a relationship with Jesus. I mean, Jesus gives him a vision. This means, all right, they're not unclean. You go and preach to them. And he says, nope, I'm not going. He gives it to him again. He gives 3 times, Si.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. He gives him this vision and then still had to miraculously, he sends Gabriel over to Cornelius in Acts chapter 10, the first 4 verses, to miraculously intervene and tell him, your prayers have ascended up as a memorial before God and are acceptable. And then he, sends Peter to Cornelius, a divine orchestrated meeting. But even then, this is unbelievable. So after 3 visions, a divinely orchestrated appointment where Jesus or St. Peter gets together with Cornelius, and he still didn't want to baptize him. And so he preaches the gospel to them, and while he was preaching, the Holy Spirit fell upon them. And then Peter says, you got to see this, but the end of Acts chapter 2, right? Not Acts chapter 2. That would have been Acts chapter 10, right near the end. He then says, how could I refuse baptism to these that the Holy Spirit had fallen upon the same way it fell upon us? Okay, I'll baptize them. I mean, it's incredible. But all of this points to this fact. There are not 2 gospels. There is one gospel of Jesus Christ, and sometimes this error rears its ugly head today in various ways. You'll have people saying, don't preach to the Jews. They have their own covenant with God. That gets my ire up, Si.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
there's not 2... there's not 2 gods.
There's one gospel. There is one truth. In fact, the Old Testament finds its fulfillment in Jesus Christ and the New, and every person on this planet has a right to hear the fullness of the gospel. How dare we come up with theologies that say, oh, no. Don't give them the Eucharist, right? They're fine right where they are. No, they are not. There's one gospel of Jesus Christ. There's one Lord, one faith, one baptism, says Ephesians 4:5, and everyone needs that one Lord, one faith, and one baptism.
Victoria, thank you so much for that question, especially because it sparked that answer. I'm very, I was thinking about PETA when you said kill and eat. You were thinking about Seventh-day Adventists. I was like, PETA's not going to like that.
I got to admit, every time I go past a farm, especially when we're driving up in Northern California with all those farms and stuff, I see those cows and I think, burgers, baby.
we got about 1 trillion burgers up there in the middle of the state, up in the San Joaquin Valley. Let's go to Catherine now in Washington, D.C., listening on Guadalupe Radio. Catherine, your question for Tim.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you. So I am contemplating marriage with my boyfriend. I'm a Catholic and born and raised. And he was born and raised Baptist, and his family is heavily involved in the Baptist church.
Yes.
He is not very connected to his faith at the moment, and from what I've gathered, it seems to be because there was kind of a fire and brimstone aspect to his upbringing within the Baptist church, and his mother, and from what I've read in her text messages and he's explained to me, kind of says things in a pretty harsh way about how Jesus is, would be disappointed in his choices in life. And he's actually a really lovely and good person. So it's been very surprising to me, and I just didn't grow up that way. So it's shocking on multiple levels. But we have been talking about getting engaged this year. And I know that as soon as we do get engaged, her first question is going to be, where are you going to get married? Right. And I've explained to him that we have to get married in the Catholic Church for my marriage to be valid in my faith.
Yes.
And he's on board with that. And he's been very receptive in a lot of ways to the Catholic Church. He's very confused by a lot of it. But he's been, he's come to Mass with me on multiple occasions, and he's been kind and very loving towards it. But he has told me, I don't really understand why you guys believe what you believe. And I've been trying to look for different books and articles that I can, send to him. But I want to make sure that I have a good understanding of it first. So
Sure.
my first question is, how can I get him to really understand our faith in a way that will make him be able to defend us a little bit better when we have to tell her that we're getting married in the Catholic Church? And then also, how do I engage with her in a more loving and fellow Christian way?
Yes.
I have no issue with her faith, but she has made some comments about how Catholics worship statues and we are not in step with Christ.
Well,
Yeah.
Catherine, I hate to do this to you. We're going to have to get the answer on the other side because we're coming up against what we call a hard break. But I just wanted to know from you before we take that break, and Tim will address your question. Why would you ask Tim Staples about how a Catholic should deal with a Baptist?
She may not know. I was raised Southern Baptist, Catherine, and later became a minister in an Assemblies of God community. So I look forward to chatting with you on the other side of the break.
Catherine, thanks. Can you hang on to the other side of the break?
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. We're very grateful for your call. Hang on. And Tim will help you, I am sure. This is Catholic Answers Live, open forum today. Any question you have about the life, the faith, the history of the Catholic Church is welcome. 888-31-TRUTH is the number, 888-318-7884. Right back with more after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
We need Catholic radio because we need the voice of the Church in the public forum. We live in a time that the secular voice dominates so thoroughly that we need to get that Catholic perspective out. Just as Fulton Sheen used radio and TV in the last century, we need to continue to use. This means to announce the Catholic faith in the public forum.
Bishop Robert Barron thinks Catholic radio is important. So should you.
What difference does it make who or what you worship or what you believe? Sharing the faith used to make some people mad because it challenged their own strong beliefs. Today, it makes a lot of people yawn because they don't have strong beliefs about anything. Religious indifference is the great spiritual sickness of our age, a product of the relativism that dominates modern culture. This is Matt Nelson, and in my new book, Just Whatever, I'll take down the building blocks of religious indifference one by one. We'll look at the different kinds of indifference you tend to encounter in your friends and family members to see where they come from and why they're seductive. What you believe matters. Find out why and what to do about it in my new book, Just Whatever. You can order your copy of Just Whatever by calling 1-888-291-8000, by visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Catholic Answers is a media ministry that serves Christ by explaining and defending the Catholic faith. We help Catholics grow in their faith, we bring former Catholics home, and we lead non-Catholics into the fullness of the truth. Our goal is to be the most trusted and accessible source for sharing, explaining, and defending the Catholic faith through as many media as possible, from personal contact to the most innovative means of mass communication. Have questions? We've got answers. Catholic Answers. Visit us today at Catholic.com or call us with your questions at 619-387-7200.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Tim Staples, our guest this hour. Jimmy Akin next hour. Can you ask for 2 better hours than that? And it's open forum too, so you get to ask them any question you want having to do with religious things in general, or specifically about anything you'd like to know about the Catholic Church. Open forum means anyone can call as well. Whether you're Catholic or not Catholic, your call is very welcome. 888-318-7884. When we went to the break, Catherine was telling us that she's Catholic.
Yes.
She's marrying a young man who's Baptist, but he's not really practicing his Baptist faith, and his mother's very strict Baptist.
Yes.
She wants some help.
Well, you know, Catherine, you are very blessed to be in a situation where your future husband is very open to the faith, has gone to Mass with you. That's a great sign, because often, you know, Catherine, and just so you know, the Church does have caveats, even though, of course, we're permitted as Catholics, if we get special permission, to marry folks that are not Catholic. But even the Code of Canon Law warns, as does the Catechism of the Catholic Church, that sometimes, you know, these problems arise because of marrying someone that's not Catholic, and sometimes it happens later in the marriage, especially when children come along. So it's great that you're talking now. He understands that you need to be married in the church, and he also needs to understand you're going to need to raise the children Catholic and things like that. It sounds like he's open to all of that, though, and that's a real blessing. I would recommend that you get him started with some good books. We have some great stuff here. In fact, I immediately thought of Trent Horn's new book, Why We're Catholic. Great little book. It's really simply written. It's short. It's succinct, but it deals with a lot of different topics. I think your fiance would really, really love that book. Also, we have a little tract at Catholic Answers called Pillar of Fire, Pillar of Truth. It is amazing how much we got in that one little tract. I would recommend those two things to get started, and also avail yourself to the tens of thousands of pages of free information we have at Catholic.com. Check out our website. This is the second most visited Catholic website in the world. Only the Vatican's website surpasses us in numbers of visits. We've got a blog. We've got all sorts of literally encyclopedic literally Catholic encyclopedia, but we have encyclopedic knowledge of the faith that's represented there on the website. And remember this too, that you're going to learn in this process, because I'll guarantee you, your future mother-in-law, I know, I come from that background. She loves you, and I know she loves our Lord. And so sometimes when she comes at you and it looks like it's double barrels blasting and you're going, oh my gosh, why is she doing this? It is really because she loves Jesus, and she has serious concerns about the Catholic faith. Things like you mentioned, they think we worship statues. I used to think that about Catholics, right? So you're going to be able to get some good information at Catholic.com to be able to help to respond. Help her to understand that, no, the Catholic Church doesn't teach we worship statues. No, we condemn, in fact, the worship or the adoration of anything or anyone other than Almighty God. Statues and such are there to honor God and the saints, to remember them, much like I have pictures in my wallet of my wife and kids, so when I'm on the road, I'll pull them out and give my wife and kids a kiss before I go to bed. Now, that doesn't mean I'm worshiping my wife and kids, although I get close when it comes to my wife. All right. But it means I love them. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about statues. So you'll be able to help Catherine by getting good information here at Catholic Answers. And please, we are here for you. You can call back. You can email us. In fact, our webmaster there at the website, you can ask questions, and we will be here for you.
And you and your boyfriend can call together sometime. Get him on the line with us, and we'll chat with the two of you. We do want those books that Tim mentioned, Why We're Catholic, and then Pillar of... Oh, you got another thing?
Yeah, there was one last thing I needed to say. You had said earlier that we have Tim Staples in the first hour and Jimmy Akin coming up in the second hour.
Yeah.
But actually, there's something even better.
What's that?
Rochelle Lucero.
Oh.
She's better than both of us. She has a podcast. Oh, hey, she's
Wait,
here.
I hear a little chuckle. That could be Rochelle herself. Catherine, hang on the line. They're going to get your address so we can send you those books for free. And thanks so much for the call. Rochelle Lucero, how are you?
I'm great.
You're not the only person named Lucero in this building.
No, I think I'm the fourth person named Lucero in this building.
Because Rochelle got married to one of the Luceros here in the building. What was it? Not about
a year ago.
Was it a year ago?
Yeah,
Really?
last
Holy
May.
smokes. And you have this brand new podcast, Clumsy Theosis.
Yes.
I love the name.
I do too.
And I am very clear on what the word clumsy means. You're going to have to help me with the rest of it. So what's the podcast all about?
The podcast is about taking 2,000 years of Catholic history with regard to the greatest minds and the spiritual masters. I boil down, what they taught. I distill it. I don't water it down. Just boil it down to what the main points are and explain it in a practical way to help 21st century Christians to really grow in their faith and become like Christ.
Amen. And you know what? I say she's better than me and Jimmy because she brings the feminine touch, right? We've got way too much testosterone here at Catholic Answers. We need the feminine touch, and we have it here in Rochelle.
Although I have to say, you talk like a millennial when you're around here.
Right.
So do you talk like a millennial on the podcast?
Guilty. Yeah.
So are you saying Jesus loves millennials as well? I'm not.
Yeah,
Okay,
and I
all
hate
right.
to, be the bearer of bad news for those
No,
of
that's
you who
good
want to
news.
stick it to us millennials. But yeah, I mean, I am a millennial. My podcast was originally designed for people my age in their 20s and 30s, but I've been really surprised that middle-aged listeners are really liking it. I mean, I shared it with my parents, and my parents are very honest with me. I thought that they'd be like, "Oh, that's nice, honey. Good job."
Yeah.
But they really dig it, and they've shared it with their friends in their Bible study, and they're really getting a lot from it.
Yeah, I shared with you the other day when we were talking about how surprised I am that you're as good as you are.
Yeah, thanks.
Wait, that doesn't. I guess that came out wrong. But okay, so before we go any further and ask you any more questions about clumsy theosis, for people like me, for example,
Yes.
people who forget that there's a difference between a blog and a podcast.
Yes.
How do we get it?
So first, a podcast is a pre-recorded audio clip. So I've pre-recorded these, and you can download them or subscribe, however you want to do it. And if you have a smartphone, you can go to your app store, and if you have iTunes, you go there, you type in Clumsy Theosis, and then you hit subscribe. Google Play Store for people with Androids. Go there and you type in Clumsy Theosis and hit subscribe, and then you'll get alerts whenever they come in, and then you can listen to them. I put one out every week. So usually on Fridays, there will be one.
I'm unhappy with Nick about this too, because he gave you the best music for the...
I chose the music.
Oh, you chose the music.
Yes.
Oh, that's why. Sorry, Nick. My bad. All right, maybe you... for those who don't know what theosis is that important to my life, theosis?
Are you kidding me, Si?
I am not kidding you.
Yes,
I am
theosis
prompting you.
is the most important thing for a Christian.
What?
Yes.
Really?
It is what your life is all about.
Wow. Explain that, please.
Theosis is the process of becoming God-like. It's a transformation that requires the grace of God, but you must cooperate with it to become like God who is love. And we have the Catholic Church the church is so full of all of our sacraments, the liturgy, everything, and all of that is there to help us to become like God, or God-like. Sorry, it's a better way to put it.
It's so extraordinary to me that I think many Christians will almost be surprised by that. We don't talk about it enough. That the reason for all these sacraments, all these churches, is so that human beings can become godlike, because God became a man so that men could become like God.
Yeah. And who was it who said, that which is not assumed cannot be healed? Was that Gregory of Nazianzus?
Yes.
Yeah, so with Jesus coming, not only did he restore our humanity, but he also showed us what it is like for God to walk around on earth. So like it gives us a perfect example. And that starts here for us on this side of the veil. It doesn't start, once we pass away. So we start now to become godlike.
Yeah, and I get the clumsy part, because none of us, and I think people get disappointed in themselves. Yes. Like, it's supposed to be a straight line. Like, I love Jesus. Why do I zigzag and fall back and do all these things?
Mm-hmm.
But that's what it is to be human.
It is.
I love, too, your emphasis, on the great masters, because we as Catholics in particular, we have in the Blessed Virgin Mary the grace of God perfected in a real human person outside of the Blessed Trinity, where we can look to and see, wow, it's been done. And we have the lives of the saints as well, their teachings as well as their living by example.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them great sinners who became saints, some of them like St. Teresa, who were pretty much always, good and such. But what a great gift we have, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Clumsy Theosis is the brand new podcast from Rochelle Lucero. You can get it by going to wherever you get apps, right? So if for your phone, if
iTunes, iTunes, Google Play Music, wherever you get your podcast. I use Podcast Addict. That's just me.
Oh, so wherever you get your podcasts. And if you don't get podcasts, find out how to get podcasts and get Clumsy Theosis.
Clumsy Theosis.
Clumsy Theosis. You cannot forget that name.
No.
Clumsy Theosis. That is so catchy.
Rochelle, you are all right. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks.
Amen.
I'm glad you approved that.
I would like you to be the guest host for Catholic Answers Live sometime. Could we?
Yeah, that would be sweet.
Yeah, that's what you say
Yeah.
on the air. That's not what you say when
Sweet.
I ask you off the air. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Open Forum with Tim Staples on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers, the most trusted name in Catholic apologetics.
Right now, Catholic Answers is conducting its summer campaign. We're going into the lean summer months, and we're forecasting a shortfall of $220,000 before our income picks up again later in the year. This is a crucial time because we need to offset that drop in donations. To make your donation and get your special thank you gifts, visit Catholic.com and click the Summer Campaign banner. Or call us toll-free at 888-291-8000. That's the Summer Campaign banner at Catholic.com, or call toll-free 888-291-8000.
We live in an age of indifference. Does truth exist? Maybe. Is there a God? Who knows? Does it matter what religion you believe in? Probably not. If you think so, fine. I'm spiritual, but not religious. Apologist Matt Nelson says this indifference is the great spiritual sickness of our age, a product of the relativism that dominates our culture. And rather than remain indifferent, he did something about it. In his new book, Just Whatever, Matt looks at the different kinds of indifference you likely encounter in your friends and family members, and maybe in yourself, and offers an antidote to the problem that plagues our age. Order your copy of Just Whatever today by calling 1-888-291-8000, logging on to the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
St. John Paul II stated that, for the disciple of Christ, evangelization is a duty, an obligation of love. And the Catechism of the Catholic Church states that evangelization is necessary for salvation.
So we know we're called, but how do we do it?
St. Paul Street Evangelization can help. To learn more, contact us at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Catholic Answers Live is brought to you in part by CatholicSingles.com, the website for Catholics who want to meet others who share their faith and values for faith, fellowship, and love. You can learn more at CatholicSingles.com. Catholic Answers Live thanks CatholicSingles.com for their generous support.
Call now with your question, 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Tim Staples in studio with us this hour. Tim's the author of Behold Your Mother, A Biblical and Historical Defense of the Marian Doctrines. And you can get that at shop.catholic.com, which prompts me to remind you that right now is the big December sale over at shop.catholic.com. You can get some items for $10 each, some for $5, some as low as $1 each. The items that are on sale include stuff from Jimmy Akin, our own Tim Staples right here, Gary Machuda, Matt Fradd, and a whole bunch more. Go to shop.catholic.com. There's a banner that just pops up when you go there, and it has $1, $5, and $10 deals on books and DVDs. Remember also that there's $5 flat rate shipping within the continental U.S. on all of that. So visit shop.catholic.com right now and find out those particular items that are at greatly reduced rates. Our next guest is Samantha from Seattle, also watching on YouTube. I feel like everybody calling today is watching. Usually it's mostly listening, but Samantha, thanks for watching us on YouTube. Your question for Tim.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
Yes.
So I am seeing a counselor, and her opinion on Catholics' view of divorce is not a good one. She is Christian, and she says that in the Bible, Jesus said divorce is okay for adultery, and I didn't know how to respond to that.
Yeah, well, actually, she's got it wrong. Jesus never says divorce is okay for adultery. However, we do, as Catholics, believe sometimes divorce is necessary. Now, let me back up here. She's referring to the famous, what we call the porneia clause in Matthew chapter 19, when Jesus was teaching on divorce. It was actually sort of, he was moved into the conversation by basically getting in between an ongoing argument between the Sadducees and the Pharisees, because the Sadducees were the more liberal Jews of the first century that taught you could divorce your wife for any reason whatsoever, right? I mean, she didn't cook your breakfast right, you can divorce her. Literally. I mean, it was for any cause whatsoever. And the Pharisees were more strict. And so it's interesting. If you go to Mark's, I think it's Mark's version in Mark chapter 10, you'll find it in Luke 16:18, Mark chapter 10, and in Matthew 19, where this teaching is. But especially in Mark's version, you get that sense of, the Pharisees come up to him and they say, is it right? Is it okay to put your wife away for any cause, right? So they're kind of inserting Jesus into the argument here. And of course, Jesus' response, and this is very important that you point out to your friend here, Jesus' response is that they're both wrong, basically, because he responds to them. If you look in Mark chapter 10 or in Matthew 19, he says, have you not read from the beginning it was not so that the two became one flesh? He quotes Genesis 2:24. He says, Moses permitted divorce in the Old Testament because of the hardness of your hearts, but from the beginning it was not so. Therefore, he says, what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. There Jesus elevates. In fact, he does more than just restore marriage back to its original intent, to be, what we would call naturally a permanent state, right? We talk about how even natural marriage is it's intrinsically indissoluble. I'm maybe getting into the weeds here a little bit. If you can hang with me for a second. Even natural marriage can only be dissolved by a divine authority. Hence, Moses had the authority to say that marriages in the Old Testament could be dissolved. Why? Because they were natural marriages. There was no sacrament of marriage in the Old Testament. What Jesus does in Mark 10, in Matthew 19, and Luke 16:18, he elevates marriage to the level of a sacrament. He basically says, both of you guys, listen up. There's no divorce and remarriage any longer, because what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. Now, it's important to point out, though, there are reasons for divorce, but there's never reasons for remarriage if you have a valid sacramental marriage, because what Jesus says holds, right? You'll find it in Matthew 19, verse 6, what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. But there can be cases, right, where you have a valid sacramental union, but things go awry, somebody's being abused and so forth. The church says, get out of that. However, very importantly, if you go to 1 Corinthians 7, verse 10, St. Paul teaches on that very thing. What do you do in a case like that? St. Paul says, in that situation, it is okay to go apart, but you must pray to be reconciled or remain single. Notice how St. Paul says it's not a possibility to be remarried because you're already married. Now, we do have, and what's hinted at in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 19, there are cases where we have annulments. That is, the church investigates into a situation where, you've had a couple split, and the church investigates. We have what's called a tribunal. Every diocese in the world has a tribunal, and they investigate. And if they discover that there were impediments, there were problems at the outset of the marriage, to where they discover actually you did not have a valid sacramental marriage from the start, that marriage can be declared null and void. In other words, it never happened on a sacramental level. Of course, you had a natural marriage there. Well, now in the case of Catholic, you may not have had any, it's not natural, it's not supernatural at all. You could have had a marriage that the state recognizes, but I want to be careful here, because that would not be valid or sacramental if the church declares it to be annulled. But the bottom line is, I would bet you that this psychologist that you're talking to doesn't even understand the church's position here, because often I hear it said that, oh, Catholics, they have to stay in marriages even if the husband is abusing the wife and this sort of thing. And that is simply not true, because we do believe there are cases. Sometimes divorce is a necessary evil, and you can have one spouse that is absolutely innocent in this. They're deserted or they're abused and such. There's no culpability whatsoever on their end. But if it was a valid sacramental union, St. Paul says you can separate, but you cannot remarry. Why? Because what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. Unless, of course, the church determines that that marriage never happened. It was never valid or sacramental from the start. Does that help at all?
Yes, that helps a lot.
Yeah, there's some really good stuff. In fact, we have a 20 answers booklet here on annulments. You might want to take a look at. They're only like $2, I think, to get marriage and annulment. It's I think Jim Blackburn wrote it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Jim Blackburn. It's a great little booklet. It answers these questions that I mentioned here and a whole lot more. I'd really recommend it.
You know what, Samantha, just hang on. We'll see if Thomas can get your address. We'll send you a free copy of it. Can you do it, Thomas? Thomas says yes, he can do it. Let's go now to Jordan in Detroit, Michigan, listening on Ave Maria Radio. Jordan, your question for Tim.
Hey, good evening. I had a question because, so like in today, we typically just say priest, talking about the ordained priest, but in the New Testament, other than like 1 Corinthians 11, where it's clear that St. Paul is talking about his priestly order, about, celebrating sacrifice of the Mass and the Eucharist, he references a lot himself being called like a preacher, teacher, apostle. So I was just wondering if there's anywhere else in the New Testament outside the Gospels and 1 Corinthians 11 that kind of supports also the priestly order of the apostles.
Sure. In Romans chapter 15, verse 16, in fact, St. Paul uses a verb form of the word ierios in Greek, which means priest, and he describes his apostolic ministry as a priestly ministry. That's in Romans chapter 15, verse 16. Now, having said that, I think it's important to point out that in the early church, when the church was first instituted by Jesus Christ and begins to grow, the church differentiated her priesthood from the more numerous Jewish priesthood and the pagan priesthoods of the first century. That's why we believe that you don't find, the term ierios used so much, although you do have it there in Romans 15, 16, as I said, and as you mentioned in 1 Corinthians 11. But even there, you don't have the term ierios being used. But what you have in the New Testament, when it comes to the ministry of the apostles and the ordained, you find their ministry is a priestly ministry. That's why Paul uses a verb form of the word priest to describe his apostolic ministry in Romans 15, 16. But everywhere else, when you see the functions of the apostles, you see that it's priestly in nature. Why is that? Well, what is a priest? A priest, by definition, is a mediator between God and men. That's what a priest is, right? A priest offers sacrifice, for example, in Hebrews chapter 8, right? You're not a priest if you don't have something to offer. Jesus offers himself on the cross and in the holy sacrifice of the Mass. Well, priests also, in acting as mediators between God and men, they proclaim truth, they offer sacrifice, they also forgive sins. Well, what you find in the New Testament is all of these priestly functions that Jesus did. And by the way, nobody denies that Jesus wasn't a priest. He's a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, right? So priest, in proclaiming the gospel as he does, he's more than just a preacher. He's a priest because he's a mediator between God and men. He is bringing the message of reconciliation as St. Paul describes it in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 18. He brings both the ministry and the message of reconciliation to the world, bringing God to the world and the world to God. That is a priestly ministry. That's what Jesus does. Well, in the same breath you find in the New Testament. This is uncanny. It's so Catholic. Of course, the Bible is. We also see the apostles do the same thing. So he'll say, as the Father sent me, right, to forgive sins in John 20, 21 through 23, I send you. As the Father sent me to teach all nations, I send you to do the same thing. And on down the list we can go. Check it out, Matthew 28, 18 through 20 and beyond. So all of the priestly functions of Jesus, he communicates to his priests, the apostles, and the ordained down through the centuries.
Jordan, thanks so much for the call. Tim, thanks for a great hour. Really appreciate it.
Too much fun, my friend.
Went by quick. Next hour, Jimmy Akin will be in here, so if you're on the line, stay on the line. If you haven't dialed yet, 888-31-TRUTH is the number. It's open forum, so you can ask any question you might have about the Catholic faith, about Catholic life, and you don't have to be Catholic to call. 888-31-TRUTH. Right back with more of that after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Can you trust the basis of the Christian faith? The Christian faith is under constant attack today in numerous ways, but the attack that does the most damage is the one that asks a deceptively simple question. What if your faith is based on a myth? The skeptics come with arguments to cast doubt in numerous ways, often attacking the reliability of the New Testament and the Gospels. And the sad news is that most people don't know how to answer these charges. The good news is that there are answers to each and every one of them, good solid answers. That's why Catholic Answers Studios has just released Jimmy Akin's new DVD, The Dawn of Christian History. With his characteristic wit and passion as a master storyteller, Jimmy takes you through an exciting detective story that reveals how history supports the Christian faith. Order your copy of The Dawn of Christian History today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Hi, this is Tim Staples. Are you looking for an on-fire Catholic speaker to come and speak at your conference or parish event? We've got a whole host of Catholic Answer speakers just waiting to get on a plane and come see you. Go to CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com to get all the information you need to make your event the talk of the town. That's CatholicAnswersSpeakers.com. We look forward to seeing you.
God helps those who help themselves. Preach the gospel always. When necessary, use words. We all hear sayings like these, and we assume they come from the Bible, the saints, or famous Christian writers. Nobody can seem to place their origin, but by sheer repetition, they've acquired a halo of truth. In my new book, What the Saints Never Said, I look at over 40 of these well-known sayings and track them back to their original sources. You'll be surprised at what I found. Some are close to what was really said. Many were misattributed or twisted beyond their original meaning, and more than a few of these sayings were simply made up. I hope by setting the record straight, I can make you aware of the theological errors that can lead us away from the faith and offer you authentic quotes from Scripture, saints, and scholars that will draw you closer to our faith. Get your copy of What the Saints Never Said by calling 1-888-291-8000, by visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or by asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know that Catholic Answers Live is on TV? What began as a monthly series on EWTN in April of 2017 is now going to be coming to you on a weekly basis. You can catch Catholic Answers Live TV Saturdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on EWTN, with an encore at 2:30 a.m. on Sundays. We'll also be available soon on Apple TV, Roku, and the Augustine Institute's multimedia platform, Form. Make a point of making Catholic Answers Live TV part of your weekly viewing, and we'll see you on the airwaves.
Over the years, we have heard thousands of stories of how the ministry of Catholic Answers and Catholic Answers Live has changed lives all over the world. Do you have such a story? We'd love to hear how Catholic Answers has changed your life. Send your story to us today. Email us at mystory@catholic.com, or you can call 619-387-7200 to make an audio recording of your story.
Sharing the gospel with family and friends can be challenging. It's especially hard when they won't even hear you out because of all the mental roadblocks they've built up. This is Carlo Broussard, and in my new book, Prepare the Way, my aim is to help you tackle that essential first step to apologetics and evangelization, getting people to listen with an open mind. Even our best witness can bounce right off folks like these if we don't prepare the way first, breaking down barriers and leaving minds and souls free to encounter the truth. I'll give you evidence and arguments and step-by-step strategies based on asking the right questions to help them overcome their obstacles and make a straight path for the Lord. Order your copy of Prepare the Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Open Forum on Catholic Answers Live. Open Forum is what we do generally on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we're very happy to have you here with us. I am Cy Kellett, your host, and you are welcome to call if you have any question of a religious nature, particularly if you have questions about the Catholic Church, Catholic faith, Catholic people. Whether or not you're Catholic, your call is very welcome here, 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. Our guest this hour is Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers and the author of A Daily Defense, 365 Days Plus One to Becoming a Better Apologist. Hi, Jimmy. How are you?
Hey, how you doing, Cy?
I am doing really well. I feel like it almost feels like deja vu because we were just here doing this together.
Yesterday.
One day ago. Yeah. And we got a question in the emails.
In the emails.
I don't know where I was going with that, but I believe I got
over the tubes in the interwebs.
Yeah, right. Somehow it found its way through the tubes in the interwebs. It's from a man named Carl.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you shared it with me, so it must have come to you, or did
it came to Darren and he forwarded it to both of us.
Oh, got it. Okay, so and this is what Carl would like to know.
Okay,
all of the Passion narratives seem to agree that the Jews were unable to sentence anyone to death, so they wanted Pilate to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, very soon after the crucifixion, we see Stephen being stoned to death by presumably many of those same people. What changed, if anything, in the interim?
Okay, so this is a question that has a very interesting answer. Now, it's not just the Gospels that indicate that the Jewish authorities didn't have the ability to inflict capital punishment, that they had to go to the Roman procurator for that. Josephus, the Jewish historian, later on in the first century, indicates the same thing. And he tells a very interesting story about what happened in the year AD 62. Now, you may remember at one point, this is later in the book of Acts, Paul is in Jerusalem and a riot starts and he gets arrested and taken to the governor's palace up in Caesarea Maritima, which is on the seacoast, which is why it's called Maritima. And while he's there, at first, the governor is a guy named Felix. And Felix likes listening to Paul. He's also hoping Paul's going to give him a bribe. But Paul doesn't, and so he keeps him in jail for 2 years. And then he's replaced by a new governor named Festus. And Festus is a very efficient and honest governor, and he deals with Paul's case expeditiously, doesn't leave him languishing in jail anymore, and ends up, when Paul invokes his right to have his case heard by Caesar, who at this time would have been Nero, he says, okay, you've appealed to Caesar you will go, and they ship Paul off to Rome for his first Roman imprisonment. Now, Festus continued to govern in Judea for a few years, but in AD 62, he died. And so Caesar, Nero, then sent a replacement governor named Albinus. But it took Albinus a while to get there. And that meant while we have this interregnum between Festus and Albinus, the Jewish authorities are the highest authorities there. And the high priest at the time was a guy named Ananus ben Ananus.
Oh.
And so he's like Ananus Jr.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he decided, hey, now that there's no governor for the moment, I can throw my weight around. And one of the things I want to do is get rid of that annoying person, James the Just, the brother of Jesus.
Okay.
And so he ended up executing James the Just, the brother of Jesus. But in doing so, he usurped an authority that the Romans had reserved to themselves, namely capital punishment. And so while Albinus was still on the road, the Jews sent delegates to him and said, hey, you need to be aware of what's happening with the high priest. He's killing people. Yeah. And so when Albinus gets there, he deposes Ananus from the high priesthood. So this is an illustration of how the Romans did reserve the death penalty to themselves, but during these interregnum periods, the Jewish authorities might seize the initiative to do stuff on their own.
I see.
And so let's look back to the time of Jesus. Well, in AD 33, the most probable year for the crucifixion, the governor was Pontius Pilate. He served from AD 26 to AD 36, so like 10 years. And so during that period, the Jewish authorities needed to go to him to have Jesus executed. But then, towards the end of the reign of Tiberius, Pilate gets recalled to Rome for mismanagement. He had massacred a bunch of Samaritans, and that generated complaints, and he gets recalled to Rome. And it takes a while for his new replacement, Marcellus, to get there. And the best explanation for the execution of Stephen and the ongoing executions that were then overseen in part by St. Paul is that they occurred in the interregnum between Pilate and Marcellus in the year AD 36. So you can date the events of Acts chapters 7 through 9. 7 is Stephen's speech before the Sanhedrin. He then gets executed in chapter 8. Paul is continuing executions in chapter 9. You can date the events of Acts 7 to 9 to the year AD 36. So very interesting question, bringing up a bit of biblical chronology. Yeah. Incidentally, one thing, you could argue that Stephen was just a lynching. So it was an extra, because he's given this speech, people get enraged.
Like the woman caught in adultery would have been.
They'd drag him out and stone him. Yeah, exactly. So although you could use lynching as, say, this is an extrajudicial one, you can't say that for Paul's because he has letters from the high priest authorizing him to do this.
Yeah, right. And Stephen, just by the fact that he appeared before the Sanhedrin, wouldn't that make
Well, you could also nail him for that, too. I mean, if you're the Roman governor, it's like, hey, look at what you guys did in your official Hall of Justice.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it was called a Hall of Justice?
Actually, it was called the Hall of Hewn Stones, but it's where they administered justice.
Oh. Because wasn't there a later Hall of Justice?
Yeah, some real super friends hung out there.
Carl, thanks so much for that question. Carl sent it, and he wasn't sure if it was one that we should save for the Weird Questions show.
It wasn't weird, just interesting.
Yeah. So that's why we got to it today, Carl. But if you ever have a weird question that you want to ask Jimmy Akin, send it to radio@catholic.com, and we'll do our very best to take care of it on Weird Question Friday when we get to it. 888-318-7884 is our number, and we go now to Scott in Iowa, listening on 106.1 FM. Scott, your question for Jimmy Akin.
Yeah, so my question, I was listening to your guys' show a little while ago, maybe a week or two, and I heard a pretty good attack you guys had on substitutionary atonement, which I when I say attack, I don't mean anything.
You mean critique?
Yeah, that's what I mean. And
not substitutionary atonement, but penal substitution. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yes. That I think that's the technical term. And so I wanted to hear more about vicarious merit, just because I think you guys had to kind of move on to the next one, and so it wasn't a very thorough explanation of vicarious merit. And so I did some reading into it, but I don't seem to be quite following exactly how vicarious merit is supposed to work. From my understanding, Jesus's sacrifice on the cross was such a good thing that God forgave everyone's sins. But yet I'm still not quite following what was so great about it if he wasn't actually dying in place of another or something, or like I said, I didn't quite follow it.
Okay.
So first of all, I think it's important that we clarify our terminology, because it's easy to get things mixed up if we're loose about that. The idea of that you've probably heard critiqued on the show is called penal substitution. And the idea of penal substitution is that God punished Christ as our substitute. So Christ substituted for us on the cross, and that's certainly true. He did serve, he did go to the cross on our behalf in order to accomplish something for us. But the question is, did God literally punish him there? And that's where the word penal comes in. Penal has to do with punishment. It's from the Latin word for punishment. And so in some areas of the Christian world, you will have people saying God literally punished Jesus in our behalf, in our stead. And that's a problem because Jesus is not only infinite, he's not only innocent, he's also infinitely holy. And it would make no sense for a just God to literally punish an infinitely good person. So that idea doesn't make any sense. Now, you might be able to poetically say he took our punishment or something like that, but you wouldn't mean it literally. And so that's the idea that was being critiqued. So whatever Jesus was doing for us on the cross, and there are many different converging and compatible explanations of exactly how the atonement worked. We don't have to view them exclusively as, canceling each other out. But in what Jesus did on the cross, he did something on our behalf, and it satisfied God's justice and became an occasion of mercy whereby God is willing to forgive our sins because of what Jesus did. And you can conceptualize that different ways. Sometimes the term, not penal substitution, but vicarious satisfaction, which just means vicarious means substitutionary, and satisfaction means Jesus satisfied God's requirements so that we could be saved. Vicarious satisfaction is an acceptable way to characterize what Jesus did on the cross because it doesn't involve God literally punishing Jesus. Now, in terms of the term you mentioned, vicarious merit, I'm not aware of any Catholic authors who use this term. I can figure out what it means based on the two terms that are involved. Vicarious means substitutionary or on behalf of another, and merit refers to something that pleases God and that he rewards. And so you could say, well, Jesus obviously merited our salvation on the cross. He did something that was so good for us that God is willing to forgive our sins and bring us to heaven to be with him. So he merited our salvation. And he did that in a vicarious way, namely on our behalf. So you could talk about vicarious merit in that sense, but it's not an established term. A more established term is vicarious satisfaction. You will find Catholics using that, not just for Jesus, but in other instances as well. Obviously, Jesus's satisfaction being the most important. And the idea there would be basically that on our behalf or vicariously, Jesus did something that satisfied the demands of God's justice so that we could be saved.
Scott, we'll have to leave it there. I hope that was helpful to you, but we have to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Open Forum with Jimmy Akin right after this.
Call and ask Jimmy your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Summer is upon us, and though the temperatures are going up, the prices are coming down during Catholic Answers' first ever summer book sale in the online shop at Catholic.com. For a limited time, dozens of great books are available for $10, $5, even as low as $1 a copy. This is the time to load up on solid Catholic books for you, your friends, and your family. The spectacular online event offers savings of 50% and more on books by Jimmy Akin, Tim Staples, Rod Bennett, Gary Michuta, and a whole host of esteemed authors, evangelists, and apologists. We've even got all of the books in our Catholic Answers Classics series marked down. Log on now to shop.catholic.com and take advantage of what will be one of the most exciting sales of the summer. You know it's all good stuff because it's from the people you know and trust at Catholic Answers. Log on to shop.catholic.com and start saving today.
This is Tim Staples, and I'm really excited to tell you about a special limited-time offer we've got right now on subscriptions to our award-winning Catholic Answers magazine. Sign up today during our annual subscription drive, and not only can you save big bucks off the normal price, we'll give you a digital subscription to the magazine for free. Subscribe today by calling 818-487-2011 or logging online to CatholicAnswersMagazine.com. Sign up for a one-year subscription and we'll give you $10 off the normal price. Better yet, become a 2-year subscriber and we'll up the ante by dropping the price $20. That's a saving of $10 to $20 plus a free digital subscription when you sign up for a subscription to Catholic Answers Magazine. Act now. This is our best offer of the year, and it's only available for a limited time. Subscribe to Catholic Answers Magazine before our annual subscription drive ends. Phone 818-487-2011 or go to CatholicAnswersMagazine.com today.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin's our guest this hour. It's open forum. If you've got a question about the life, the faith, the history of the Catholic Church, that is very welcome. 888-318-7884 is the number. I'm going to name some stuff here, see if you can find the common thread. Drama of salvation, understanding revelation, why you can trust the Gospels. Do you see a common thread to any of those?
They're all about religion?
I think they're all titles of works from you.
Yeah, well, that's
Did you forget that? Oh, okay. You were being modest. All those works by Jimmy, and then many more things by Tim Staples, Gary Michuta, Matt Fradd, and others are available at shop.catholic.com for either $1, $5, or $10 per book or DVD. And then you get a $5 flat rate on shipping within the continental United States. To take advantage of that, that's the June special. You just go to shop.catholic.com and you can get all that stuff at very, very low prices. Again, it is open forum today on Catholic Answers Live. We go now to Tyler in Michigan, listening on Ave Maria Radio. Ave Maria Radio coming through for us today. Tyler, your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hey, Jimmy, Cy, thank you for having me. A few of my family members have been reading this book called The Convoluted Universe, and it's about a psychoanalyst who puts people in like a trance and speaks and listens to the subconscious. It kind of brought up a red flag when it was talked about between them and myself, but I wasn't really sure what the Catholic teaching is on it. It kind of doesn't sound very right, and I just wasn't really sure where to go with that conversation. I tried just explaining, it talks about the soul and reincarnation of the soul. I tried explaining a few teachings on that, but I wasn't really sure where to go with the whole psychoanalysis thing.
Oh, okay.
So is this book fiction or nonfiction?
No, it's a fiction book.
So it's a novel.
The writer is a psychoanalyst. I believe she puts people in trance and then like records and then listens to the subconscious speak. It's really strange. But there's another book called Seth Speaks, similar in nature.
Wait, Seth Speaks? Did you?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a whole different kettle of fish. Let's deal with the question as phrased first. The church doesn't have a particular teaching on psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis is a discipline that developed in psychology fairly early on, after the psychology movement really got rolling in the late 19th and early 20th century. Psychoanalysis in particular stems from the Freudian tradition, where he would basically lay you down, let you relax, and then talk to you about your problems and what was distressing you. And he would then try to figure out what the root causes of them were, typically based on events earlier in your life, especially in childhood. And he also had an idea about the subconscious that attributed ideas to the subconscious and abilities to the subconscious that have largely been discredited. And that's true of Freudian analysis in general. Freud's theories of psychology today are looked upon broadly, although there are still Freudians, but they're looked upon broadly as early kind of fumbling steps in psychology, kind of like we would look at the science of the Middle Ages. You know, they got some stuff right, they were trying to do something legitimate, but they hadn't worked out a lot of the basics yet, and they made mistakes. And Freud's thought and that of other early psychiatrists is viewed similarly. So although the church doesn't have a teaching on this, a lot of particularly Freudian ideas have been discredited in the psychological community. Now, that doesn't mean that talking about your problems and trying to analyze them and figure them out and that kind of what was then called a talking cure, that's invalid. That's a technique that's used today, and it helps various people. So there's nothing in principle wrong with talking about your problems and trying to figure them out. People have done that all throughout history. In terms of putting people into a trance, this is another thing, that's hypnosis. The church doesn't have a teaching on hypnosis. To the extent that it's a real phenomenon, that where someone really enters an unusual state of mind that allows them to perhaps deal with various emotional issues they have, or quit smoking or lose weight or whatever it may be, it's legitimate to the extent that it has valid effects. Now, there are some sharp limits here. One of them is the effects of hypnosis on memory. These have frequently been oversold. And this is not a matter of faith right now that I'm speaking to, it's a matter of science. Hypnosis does not enable you to remember events in fantastic detail that you had forgotten and dredge them up from your subconscious. Instead, it can promote what's known as confabulation, or making stuff up unintentionally. And back in the 1980s and 1990s, a lot of people's lives were totally ruined in court cases where hypnosis was used to allegedly uncover events of childhood sexual abuse that never in fact occurred, but people got accused of it because hypnotists were using this as a technique to try to recover memories, and really what was happening was people's imaginations were just being let loose. And when subsequent studies tried to follow up and say, well, how could this have happened? Was this person really in a place to abuse this person at this time? It would turn out the answer was no. It was just confabulation. Personally, and I'm just speaking for myself here, I'm skeptical of hypnosis in general. I don't think it's really a thing. I don't think it really puts you in an altered state of consciousness. I think what happens is you relax, but you're still in your right mind, and you know, based on movies and TV shows and books, how a hypnotized person is supposed to act. And so you assume that role, and you're acting out this role, but it doesn't put you in some really weird, freaky state of mind. You're just acting a role you've seen and relaxing. And to the extent that it helps you with various things like weight loss or stopping smoking, that's just the placebo effect. You're just talking yourself into being confident that, hey, I'm going to lose weight, or hey, I'm going to stop smoking. So I personally am quite skeptical of hypnosis. Now, in terms of, as anything other than a placebo and a social role, I should say, in terms of Seth Speaks, Okay, that's a book by, if memory serves, Jane Roberts, or at least it was written in connection with Jane Roberts, who back several decades ago, like in the 1970s, was basically what we today would call a trance channeler or a medium. And she claimed that by going into a trance, she could be put in contact with a spirit called Seth. And Seth would then reveal to her various things. And it did, the Seth books, and there was more than one, but the Seth books did indeed go into reincarnation and stuff like that. And they were not presented as fiction. They were presented as this is really happening. And so you would find them, for example, in the New Age section of a bookstore. And they're definitely incompatible with the Christian faith, in particular with regard to their teachings of reincarnation and this activity of talking to a dead spirit and summoning one up. I mean, that's necromancy, where you're summoning up dead spirits to try to get information out of them. And so there is indeed cause for concern there. If you'd like to read a church document that deals with these general subjects, it doesn't deal with Seth Speaks specifically, but the Pontifical Council for Culture a few years ago came out with a document called Bearer of Living Water, which dealt with various aspects of the New Age movement. And so if you, actually the full title is Jesus Christ, Bearer of Living Water. And so if you just search for that online, it should come right up.
Tyler, thanks very, very much for the call. I hope that was helpful to you. I never had a view on hypnotism. I'm interested to hear your view about it, because I've never been hypnotized. I've never even thought I was hypnotized. But it's one of those things where you hear about that sometimes too, that people think that therapy is supposed to go a certain way because they've seen it on TV or something. So they go into therapy and they act like a patient.
Yeah.
Because they know that that's how they're supposed to act.
Yeah.
But that's how I do radio. I've
act like a host.
I act like a radio host.
You know what they say, fake it till you make it.
Yeah, one of these days I'm going to make it, Jimmy. One of these days. Jimmy Akin is our guest. Open forum is our topic, meaning if you've got a question, we'll try to get you an answer. We really welcome non-Catholic callers, so you're welcome to call if you are not Catholic. We also welcome Catholic callers on open forum days. 888-31-TRUTH is the number. Right back with more after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
Sharing the gospel with family and friends can be challenging. It's especially hard when they won't even hear you out because of all the mental roadblocks they've built up. This is Carlo Broussard, and in my new book, Prepare the Way, my aim is to help you tackle that essential first step to apologetics and evangelization, getting people to listen with an open mind. Even our best witness can bounce right off folks like these if we don't prepare the way first, breaking down barriers and leaving minds and souls free to encounter the truth. I'll give you evidence and arguments and step-by-step strategies based on asking the right questions to help them overcome their obstacles and make a straight path for the Lord. Order your copy of Prepare the Way today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
God helps those who help themselves. Preach the gospel always. When necessary, use words. We all hear sayings like these, and we assume they come from the Bible, the saints, or famous Christian writers. Nobody can seem to place their origin, but by sheer repetition, they've acquired a halo of truth. In my new book, What the Saints Never Said, I look at over 40 of these well-known sayings and track them back to their original sources. You'll be surprised at what I found. Some are close to what was really said. Many were misattributed or twisted beyond their original meaning, and more than a few of these sayings were simply made up. I hope by setting the record straight, I can make you aware of the theological errors that can lead us away from the faith and offer you authentic quotes from Scripture, saints, and scholars that will draw you closer to our faith. Get your copy of What the Saints Never Said by calling 1-888-291-8000, by visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or by asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
EWTN, Teaching the Truth.
I have wanted to thank you so very much. Thank God you guys are here for us. Believe it. I just can't believe all that you've done and how you've stuck with it. Many times when I think I can't do something, I think about some of the things that you've talked about.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Dig it. That is some rockin' groovy music right there, and Jimmy Akin's here to share it with us. What a great way to spend a Thursday afternoon.
Which is good, because I have an earworm that I'm fighting right now.
Oh, somebody told me that if you sing the theme to Gilligan's Island, it gets those earworms out.
At the price of replacing them with another.
Yeah, now you're stuck with just sit right back.
And what's this and the rest stuff?
Wait,
Come
now,
on.
Sometimes it's and the rest.
Yeah,
and
that's
sometimes
first season.
Oh, so
And
first
then
season is
later.
and the rest.
Later they changed it to the
And-
Professor and Mary Ann. It's like, come on.
You had two more people.
Couldn't you have done that in the beginning?
Yeah, right. Like,
And they're like two of the best characters too.
I
I mean, Mary Ann or Ginger. Come on.
I know. Every man knows the answer to that. And the Professor man with his cool
way more
deck
fun
shoes.
than Mr. Howell.
Yeah. Mr. Howell was. I like Jim Bacchus, right? Was
Yes,
Mr.
Jim
Howell?
Bacchus. Also
He was-
Mr. Magoo.
Yeah, he was great, Mr. Magoo. I don't know why we're talking about this. I can't remember. Oh, why were we talking?
Earworms.
About this? Earworms. Oh yeah. So you're not going to sing the theme from Gilligan's Island and get it out?
Not
Then
at
you'll-
the moment.
Yeah. Gilligan's Island was one of those TV shows that did just the thing I was talking to you about at the break. You were talking about hypnosis, and there was a time at the end of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s where every single sitcom that was on at some point had a hypnosis episode.
Yep.
And at some point had a quicksand episode.
And an amnesia episode.
And that's right, the amnesia episode. And you were pointing out the way amnesia works is amazing.
One brain trauma causes amnesia. A second brain trauma cancels amnesia.
Right. Second time you get hit with that coconut on the head, Gilligan,
That's
it all comes back to you.
1 shot stuns, 2 shots kills, and 3 shots disintegrates.
I know what that's a reference to, but the listener will have to look it up. 888-31-TRUTH is our number. No quicksand around here, no hypnosis, just answers to your questions. Anonymous in Columbus, Ohio is listening on St. Gabriel Radio. Anonymous, you're on with Jimmy Akin.
Hi, good day to you all.
You too, thank you.
Question is, did God create other gods?
Okay. The answer is no. And that's something that is indicated in the book of Isaiah. At one point in Isaiah, God declares, I am the Lord, there is none but me, there were no gods formed before me, neither shall there be any gods formed after me. So he indicates he's the one and only God, and there are not going to be any subsequent gods, and consequently he didn't make any subsequent gods. That's something you can also infer just by principles of reason, because God, by definition, is an infinite, uncreated being. And if something's an infinite, uncreated being, then it can't be created. And so God could not create an uncreated being because that involves a logical contradiction. And so it's beyond the power of omnipotence. It's not really a thing. It's just verbal gibberish, like a four-sided triangle or a married bachelor. You can't have a created, uncreated being. And so, no, God didn't make any other gods, provided we're referring to beings that are equal to him and that share his nature as an uncreated being. If you change the definition of the word God so that it refers to something less than the infinite, all-holy, uncreated creator, then you could talk about God creating other finite, quote-unquote, gods. And in fact, you will find language like that in various places in the Judeo-Christian tradition. And you'll find it, for example, in reference to angels, who are sometimes referred to as sons of God, and they're obviously created beings. At times, the term gods is even used in the Old Testament. Jesus himself pointed this out in a conversation with some of his opponents, that there's one of the Psalms that says, "You are gods," and it's talking to human rulers. And Jesus points out that the Psalms actually use the word God that way. And then the church fathers pick up that theme based on some passages in the New Testament where Peter, for example, talks about how through God's grace we become partakers of the divine nature. So we have a share of God's life in us, we acquire a share of his holiness and things like that. How the church fathers pick up on that and talk about us being made like God, or even they'll sometimes use the language, make us gods, with a little g in English. And that process is known in theology as Theosis, which would be the Greek term meaning to be made a god. But it's not the same kind of God as God himself is. It's a lesser, finite thing.
Okay, does that work for you, Anonymous?
Okay, so with just quickly, so like in Psalms when they mention about not having any other gods, I'm greater, our God is greater than all the other gods.
Mm-hmm.
Are they speaking of these finite gods that you're suggesting? Or
those passages have been taken in different ways. Some people have said, okay, the Israelites came out of a pagan culture. I mean, originally Abraham's forefathers worshipped idols, and even the Israelites continued, like when they were in Egypt and during the Exodus, to worship idols, and it took a long time to wean them off of that. And so some people look at those passages and say that Israel as a group passed through a stage where they hadn't yet really realized that there are no other gods, but they had been given the revelation, you are only to worship Yahweh. And so Yahweh is the only one you're supposed to worship, but not everybody was clear yet on the fact, and there aren't any others. Another way that those passages are sometimes taken is figuratively, meaning our God, Yahweh, he's the only one that exists, and the other so-called gods don't really exist. And that's more along the lines of something we see in St. Paul, where when he's talking about in the Roman world, there are many so-called gods, but for us there is one God. And he means there are many idols, there are many fake gods. He later elsewhere says an idol is nothing. But really, that's just a popular perception that there are all these other gods, but really we know there's just one.
Anonymous, thank you for those fine questions. Appreciate it. It is open forum today, and we go now to Nick in Pittsburgh. Nick, you're up with Jimmy Akin. Nick, have we got you there with us?
Hello?
Hi, Nick.
Hello?
Your question for Jimmy, Nick?
Oh, I didn't. Okay. Thank you for taking my call. I just have a question. I know in the Council of Trent, it says that whenever you're confessing your sins, you have to confess the number and the name of the sin. But say you don't know the number. In my experience, the priests have always just said, just say the sin then, or sometimes I'll say I don't know, or I'll estimate, or I'll take a guess if I literally have no clue.
Uh-huh.
But it's I believe it's a mortal sin. Is confession still valid at that point?
Yes.
Or is there any impediment to that?
No, the reason it's valid is you're not deliberately holding anything back. It's understood that we're not going to remember every sin. And consequently, we're not obliged to confess the number or even the sin itself if we don't remember it. What we're responsible for doing is just the best we can. So if you're able to give an exact number, well, then you need to do that. But if you don't know the exact number and you can do a reasonable estimate, well, then give an estimate. If you can't even do that, just say, I know I did this, but I can't really put a number on it. And all that's fine, because it's not like God's not going to forgive you if you forgot something and can't remember it. You're doing your part. You want to be reconciled with God. You're signifying that. You're wanting to do what you're supposed to, and you're not deliberately holding anything back. And so as long as you're not deliberately holding something back that you know you should confess, God's going to forgive you anyway.
Does that help, Nick?
Okay. Yeah, can I have a short follow-up?
Sure.
Okay, so I also have a little bit of scrupulosity, so I struggle with this a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm going through my day and I find something that might be, say, gossip, and I think, oh, that might be a mortal sin, by the end of the day, I might not remember all the circumstances surrounding that, and by the end of the week, I'm like, I have no idea if any of these things were mortal sins, so I go to confession anyway. Whenever you're unsure, say at the end of the day and you're examining your conscience, what is the best way to make a judgment on that when you don't remember all the circumstances?
There are two pieces of advice I would give you. The first one, gossip is almost never a mortal sin. In order for gossip to constitute a mortal sin, not only would you have to engage in it knowingly and deliberately in the moment, saying, I'm turning my back on God, this is just such juicy gossip, I'm willing to be damned over it, which you're probably not doing. But you would also, in addition to that, need to damage somebody's reputation in a grave way by the gossip. And usually that's not the case. Usually gossip is like, oh, did you hear this jerky thing so-and-so did?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you damaged his reputation a little bit, but not gravely. So gossip is very rarely a mortal sin, and so I wouldn't worry about that. The second piece of advice I would give you is a standard one that moral and pastoral theologians recommend for the scrupulous. If you're scrupulous, if you have tendencies in that direction, do not confess a sin unless you are certain that it is a mortal sin. Otherwise, the scrupulosity can exploit the situation and try to trap you in an agonizing cycle of doubt and confession. And you need to just put that aside and resist the temptations that scrupulosity presents you with to wallow in doubt and anxiety.
Nick, that's a pretty clear answer. I do hope that's helpful for you. We have to take a quick break, so we'll be right back with more Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live right after this.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Pope Francis said, "The key that opens the door to faith is prayer." Join St. Paul Street Evangelization by running a prayer station in the public square. You don't need to be a professional apologist or theologian. Just listen to the needs of the people you encounter. Offer encouragement, take prayer requests, and pray with people. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
God helps those who help themselves. Preach the gospel always. When necessary, use words. Sayings like these are such a part of tradition that we assume they come from the Bible, the saints, or famous Christian writers. Even though nobody can seem to place their origin, by sheer repetition, they have acquired a halo of truth. In What the Saints Never Said, Trent Horn takes over 40 of these well-known but actual dubious sayings and attempts to track them to their true source. The result? He finds some that are close to what was really said, many that were misattributed or twisted beyond their original meaning, and more than a few that were just plain made up. By setting the record straight, Trent roots out theological errors that can lead us away from Christian truth and offers authentic quotes from Scripture, saints, and scholars that will draw you closer to that truth. Get your copy of What the Saints Never Said today by calling 1-888-291-8000, visiting the shop at Catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Call now with your question, 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. We're coming down the home stretch here, so I will go as quickly as I can through these questions and not delay. Let's start with Clay in Texas, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Clay, thank you so much for downloading the Catholic Answers app on your phone. You are on with Jimmy Akin. Your question, please.
Well, thank my mother-in-law. She put it on my phone for me. So
I always liked her.
Yeah, I've never heard of you before, Jimmy, but I am very impressed with your breadth of knowledge and your clear answers. You don't always get that with Christian apologists.
Oh, well, thank you. You're very kind.
Well, just wanted to ask a quick question. It's really not even, it's more / comment question because I don't know if there's a good answer or any answer.
Mm-hmm.
It's inspired by the lady earlier who said she's going to marry a guy who's Baptist or was raised Baptist. My wife is a devout Catholic. I'm not Catholic. I was raised Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of know what her family's probably going through, or you know what I mean, the situation there. So my biggest fear is it's a big fear. So whenever my kids get old enough to realize Dad's not taking communion
Mm-hmm.
and might want to start asking questions as to why that is,
Mm-hmm.
I don't really want to raise, you know what I mean? Like, if my wife wants to raise our kids Catholic, I mean, that's great. You know, I mean, that's whatever. You know, it's what she's going to do either way. So
Mm-hmm.
I just, how do I answer my kids if that day comes? You know, which
Okay.
I don't know if it's,
Yeah. Well, so one can go into this subject in a lot of detail, but you probably don't want to do that when they're right at that age. And I don't know that it'll ever get to the point where they really need a lot of detail. But if you do, call us back and we'll point you to some resources. But in terms of a simple answer for children who are of that age, I would simply say, I'm not Catholic, and it's important to take communion in your own church. And so since you're a Catholic, you take communion here, and since I'm not a Catholic, I don't take communion here. And that's really all you need to say, and that's the truthful answer, is that it's important. Eucharistic communion is a sign of Christian unity. And so if we're not fully united, then we shouldn't be sharing this sign of unity. Now, that's something I wouldn't go into with them. I'd simply say it's important to take communion in your own church. And so that's why, and since I'm not Catholic, that's why I don't take communion in the Catholic Church. However, I would also mention, now I have a lot of sympathy for your situation because I used to, in fact, be Protestant. I'd been associated with different groups in the Protestant community, including Baptist and Church of Christ and Presbyterian during various phases of my upbringing. But when I got married, I was an evangelical, and I married a woman who very quickly after we got married went back to being Catholic. And that really threw a wrench in my career plans because I had been planning on becoming a Protestant pastor or seminary professor. And so I ended up having to say, well, I guess I'm not going to do that. I guess I'll, not with a Catholic wife, not in an evangelical context. I guess I will just go be a philosophy professor. And so I started studying for that. And then one day I made a discovery while I was reading some text from the Gospel of Matthew, and I realized that even though I had arguments to the contrary, there were features in Matthew 16 that required Peter to be the rock that Jesus is talking about when he says, on this, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. It was plain as day as soon as I saw these features. I even talk about it on my website. If you go to jimmyakin.com and look up my conversion story, or look up a paper in the library there called Why Be Catholic? An Exercise for Evangelicals, I talk about those features in the text. And I realized all in a flash, well, if Peter's the rock on which Jesus built the church, that's a pretty good description of the office of the Pope. And if Catholics were right about this, then there might have been other later popes as part of Jesus's plan, and I need to look at all these areas in theology with an open mind. And I did. I took a year and reviewed all of the different areas of theology with an open mind, and I ended up concluding the Catholic Church was right. And so I ended up becoming a Catholic, which then allowed me to, even though this wasn't why I was studying it, it in fact allowed me to be united in the same faith with my wife, and it allowed us to receive communion together. And so I would suggest maybe, take a look at some of these issues, and we've got a lot of resources that could help out. In fact, if I recently wrote a book called A Daily Defense, where I go through very brief, like one-page chapters, one for each day of the year. And a lot of what's in the book is of interest to people just coming from a Christian background. Some of it's specifically Catholic, some of it's not. But if you'd like, I'd be happy to have a copy sent to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure. I would like that a lot.
Okay.
Probably a lot further back than you as far as on a different path maybe, but I do agree with what you're saying as far as the rock. I mean, I don't even know why we talk about it.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as history goes, I don't even know why that's even a discussion with other than people just maybe don't want to admit that's what it meant. But
that's
anyhow,
a key
thank you
reason.
for that.
Okay, well, let's put you on hold, and we'll get your mailing address and see about getting you a copy of A Daily Defense.
Thanks so much, Clay. And remember, you're always welcome to call here, and we do open forums almost guaranteed twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I wanted to ask you something came to my mind when Clay was talking, and I wanted to ask you if you'd seen any of these, the research on how important a father's practice of the faith is to children.
Well, I haven't looked at the studies in detail, but I've certainly seen accounts of it being important. Yes.
Yeah. So I just thought Clay's question made me think that we got to remind men it's very important if you want your children to have a church. Go to a church. Let's go to Paul now in Pennsylvania. Paul, you are on with Jimmy Akin. Your question, please.
Yes, Jimmy. Thanks for taking my call.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering why the Greek word epiousios is translated as daily when Jerome translated it as, I think, supersubstantianum. And because so I probably pronounced that incorrectly.
That's okay.
But, I could see where Protestants might, translate it as daily. But why Catholic Bibles?
Okay, so what you're talking about is a word that appears in the Lord's Prayer in Greek in Matthew and Luke. This word, I was recently writing about this, this word is notoriously hard to translate. And the reason for that is it appears in Greek literature for the first time right here in the Gospels. There are no precedents for this term. And it's such an unusual term that the 2nd and 3rd century Greek scholar Origen, who was one of the pioneers of biblical scholarship, he said nobody uses this word. I mean, educated Greek speakers don't use this word. Common Greek speakers don't use this word. He proposed that the evangelists coined it. And so that makes it really hard to figure out what Jesus would have said in Aramaic, because this is just a really unusual term. And there are bunches of suggestions. This is one of the classic problems in commentaries on on Matthew and on Luke. Now, when Jerome did a Latin translation of the Greek text, he didn't really know what to make of it either, and so he brought the two parts of it across into Latin literally. Epi, the word being epiousios, epi means on or upon, and so he translated that with the Latin super, which means above. And ousios can, among other things, be translated substance, and so he brought that over into Latin, and between super for epi and substance for and actually that's not inflected right, but that's the root that he used for ousios. He got supersubstantialiter. And so that then gets brought into older English translations like the Douay Rheims as supersubstantial. But in terms of what it means, that's really hard because this is just a coinage based on bringing the word over from its roots in Greek into Latin. It wasn't a pre-existing Latin word either. Mm-hmm. And so there have been a bunch of suggestions about what it means. Daily is one of them, and that's the word that's been passed down in standard English versions of the Lord's Prayer. Scholars propose other things, like maybe it means today, give us today, give us our bread for today. Some have suggested it means for tomorrow, give us our bread for tomorrow today. And there are other possibilities as well, but it's just a really hard word to translate, and that's even talked about in the Catechism of the Catholic Church if you look up the section on the Lord's Prayer.
Okay, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to use this as an apologetic tool to get people to think as a pointer toward the Eucharist. And maybe I'm putting too much into that. I guess that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, because of the way supersubstantial sounds, there have indeed been Catholics who have taken it as some kind of reference to the transubstantiation or the real presence, just because the word substance is in there. But in apologetic discussions, I wouldn't go that way. There's a saying in legal circles, hard cases make bad law, and there's a parallel in apologetics, I think. Hard verses make bad apologetics, because if it's unclear what a verse means, it's not, arguments based on an unclear verse are not going to be that convincing to people who hold another point of view.
And there are quite a few passages in the Gospels that will point you towards the Eucharist, Paul.
And that are stronger and more clear.
Okay.
Wow, that was helpful, because I was planning on using that. So thank you very much.
No problem.
Well, thank you so much for the call, Paul. That's fascinating. It's the first time it appears in the Gospel.
Yeah.
There's quite a few words like that in Shakespeare in English.
Yes.
The first time we ever see him, Shakespeare using them.
He was such a lonely guy.
He was.
Well, he's the guy who invented the word lonely.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's where that came from.
Yeah, that's isn't that something? First time it appears, it's in the Gospels, and we don't know for sure what it means.
Yeah, personally, I doubt it was. It could have been Luke or Matthew, but who came up with it. But it also could have been someone who translated the Lord's Prayer into Greek before them.
Oh yeah, and then they were right.
And then they used it.
Tomorrow, please join us for the exciting introduction of our brand new game show. The title of the game show is the as yet untitled Catholic Answers Game Show. Carlo Broussard will be here first hour. We're gonna talk about. We'll do regular apologetics first hour. Second hour, Carlo will be our celebrity guest, even though he doesn't like me calling him that. For the brand new game show. See you then, God willing, on Catholic Answers Live.